Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Bulletproof Selling. This is Sean Rhodes, and I'm the Chief Sales Architect here at Bulletproof Selling and author of the book, Bulletproof Selling, a guide for systemizing sales on the battlefield of business. Here at Bulletproof Selling, we believe that hope is not a sales strategy, and so we are here to increase the pipeline performance of salespeople and the results of their teams. Now, this live stream series we have, if it's your first time joining us, we get to bring on the guests, experts from around the world, actually, insights from the top speakers, authors, consultants, trainers, and of course, those that are actually out there in the field managing salespeople. And it's always exciting when we get to bring one of those folks on, like my guest today. And of course, our commitment here is that out of every single live stream, you'll not only understand why systems are going to be more valuable for you as a salesperson, but we're going to build one here with our guests that you can use no matter the size of your team or the size of your goals. So I am very excited to be welcoming our guest here today, because he is no stranger to the world of hopping on interviews and adding value. Mr. Mike Phillips, welcome to the show, sir.
Yeah, Sean, thank you so much for having me on today. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to see where this takes us. So,
Yeah, we're going to have some fun.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so let's talk about a little bit about you. I mean, we're going to make it all about you today because everybody's used to Sean talking about Sean. So talk to us a little bit about kind of how you came up in the world of sales, where you are now, what you do as a salesperson and as a sales manager, so we can understand a little bit more about you.
Certainly. So I started, ironically, and I wouldn't have counted it at the time, but I started in sales and coaching as a youth hockey coach in the 90s. And so I was a certified USA hockey coach. I had participated in actually writing the rule book for inline hockey, believe it or not. The first draft, we tried to adapt that. And so got a taste of what it was like to coach and really watch people grow. Got in officially to sales and automotive sales into 2004. And so kind of fell into it by accident, just like a lot of used car sales people do. It's like, oh, hey, here's where I'm at. And so really, I was very fortunate to get involved with the same group that I'm with now. I've been with the same auto group for going into my 18th year here, just starting it. And learned a lot about sales, a lot about management, a lot about leadership. And then interestingly, in the last few years, realized how much impact that previous coaching experience has on, coaching salespeople, growing salespeople, and so forth. So it's been a really good opportunity to kind of hone those skills. And I have a real passion for leadership. So when we started talking, YouTube and podcasting and so forth, it's an opportunity then to get that out to a broad audience as well. So right now, again, I'm inside an auto dealership. I primarily do marketing. I'm a sales manager. I engage with, we have about 65 employees right now, and I engage day to day. My direct team has about 10 people on it. We have 2 sales floors that have 8 salespeople on average. Then we have 2 managers and kind of 2 trees that come down that pipeline as far as the showroom floor. We've got a 22-bay service center. So that's where I'm engaged at right now and have been for a number of years.
And you're in a very interesting industry. I want to talk about how you're kind of helping these folks to pivot away from having to be in person with their customers. I know you and I have shared about how you're moving to almost an entirely virtual sales experience. And for a used car dealer, like, that's almost unheard of. So we're definitely going to talk about that. But I also want to first touch on probably like the elephant in the room, if there is one. And people are like, Mike, you're a used car salesman? But
that's right.
There's a lot of stigma around that, and 100%. I know there shouldn't be, because just like any salesperson, there's good ones and bad ones. So talk to me a little bit about how your folks work to overcome that stigma now, and is there anything that's true about it that probably, like, I think of used car salespeople as very tenacious. The stereotype is they're not always ethical, but they are always tenacious. So there's always good parts about that. But talk to us a little bit about how your folks work to overcome that in building client relationships first.
Sure. Well, and to touch on what you're saying, the stigma is it's absolutely true. I mean, the people in the used car industry over time, it didn't fall in there by accident. Like, people, and the bad ones are always the ones that are talked about, earned that reputation.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
like you said, it's not even a 50-50. It's probably, 5% of the people, then those
Right.
people that are not the good ones get focused on and drilled on, and that's what gets talked about. It used to be
Yeah.
word of mouth. Now it's social media. So one of the things that we realize is to be able to overcome those stigmas, there is an opportunity in human connection. And it's ironic because it's coming from a digital marketing guy. And like you're talking about, how do we go to digital sales, and how do
Yeah.
we incorporate social media and video and all of these cool opportunities that we have right now in the world. And one of the things that I have found that is still really, really valuable is you have to complement the human relationship with those pieces. So there's still, like you and I connecting.
Yeah.
It would be one thing to send a static video so you could get an idea of who I am, right? Or so you could get an idea of who we talked about. But even first thing, before we got to this face-to-face interview, you picked up the phone and said, hey, let's have a conversation and see if this is a fit. And let's figure out what's the energy behind this guy and what's the expertise behind this guy. So we have to have that real human connection. And all of these digital pieces, in my opinion, are opportunities to complement that. So it can start digitally, turn into a human relationship, and then complement all of those pieces digitally as well.
And so for a lot of salespeople that are trying to, get back into the world of face-to-face client meetings, which is slowly beginning to happen across all the industries that we're tracking now, what have your salespeople learned to do at the outset to help overcome that stigma? Because even in salespeople's worlds that aren't selling, used cars, for instance, there's still the stigma of, oh, the salesperson's here at the office again. Like anything else on my calendar I'd rather be doing, because it was actually on my calendar than meeting with this salesperson.
Sure.
And your folks have at least a little bit of a benefit of people showing up to your lot. So it's not like y'all are standing on a corner with a sign saying buy a car.
Right.
It's not quite as much as it used to be. Some are, that's right, some are. At least next to their lot, they're not like in the middle of downtown saying, hey, visit Bob's, used cars. So how do your folks begin to overcome that stigma when somebody walks on the lot where they kind of expect like the greasy palmed used car salesman kind of a shtick?
Well, I think a lot of times, but like any sales starts before the customer is on the lot. Sales starts, and this could seem cliched or not, sales starts, for me, first thing when you get up in the morning. How are you prepping? How are you setting yourself for the day as a salesperson? Because you're going to encounter people, right? And people, the one thing that's going to be unique is each individual's personality. The one thing that you can manage is yourself and your mindset going into it. So we all look at sales, oftentimes salespeople look at sales from, well, it happens from when I'm going to extend my hand, here's the handshake. And it's like, no, it actually happens before that, because it is going to happen in your approach. How do we overcome the stigma?
Yeah.
One is just be a human, right? Just be kind and be polite. And you do have to be able to, in my opinion, in B2C sales and person-to-person sales, you do have to have the ability to read the individual a little bit. What does their body language look like? Are they accepting of you approaching them? I think even prior to that in-person engagement, there are some things, Sean, that we can do. Besides sending a canned email, send a real text, send an individually recorded video. Every single person, if we were going through this and said, hey, why don't you grab your phone right now? It is within arm's reach for everybody. And I understand, like, we're going through a podcast, but if I said, hey, Sean, could you grab your phone real quick? It's there on your person.
Yeah, here
it
is.
Desk,
got it.
Right?
Yep, there it is.
So start the conversation there. And I think it's really, really critical from the onset is however the potential customer is communicating with you is how you have to initiate that communication. If they started by texting your company, start by texting them back. See, we have this piece that they text the company, and as salespeople, we go, well, I want to jump on the phone, or I want to send them a video. We want to communicate in the manner that we're good at communicating in.
Right.
Versus if they send, like in sales, so often people are salespeople get frustrated with email leads, because if you don't give them the right answer, they never have to respond again. Right? The customer, the consumer, is in control. So the number one thing when somebody sends an email, what's the number one thing they're looking for? they're looking for an answer to their question. So my opinion and our team is like, well, first and foremost, just answer the question, start a human conversation, communicate in the format that they're communicating in. Then you can transition to other formats. Then you can transition to a different communication. Then you transition to on the lot. And that person then has some sort of view that they are already familiar with who you are as a human, not as a salesperson, just who you are as a human. And they feel like they've had some interaction with you.
I love it. So you're already kind of transitioning beautifully into the next piece, which is something I'm super excited to talk with you about, because a lot of salespeople were challenged in 2020. They came from decades of this person-to-person sales process they had, where they'd go to the client site, the prospect site, they'd shake hands, they'd sit down and talk about baseball or whatever it was, for half an hour, and then when they got done with their conversation in that office, they'd get walked down the hall to the next office where maybe there was another decision maker, and they'd build entire careers like this. Suddenly, it all gets shut down. And I'm sure that the used car industry and the car industry in general, well, I know they took a hit, actually. I remember reading about it in the papers. And so I know you're one of the pioneers in this space of figuring out how do we take something that used to be an entirely person-to-person process and move it into something that's digital. And I know that a lot of the larger car companies, and you could probably think of the brands, they're missing my mind right now, but they were always digital. You couldn't really go to an in-person lot, and they really got good at saying, you pay us the money, it's no haggle, we'll drive the car to your house, put it in your driveway, and then wave as we're leaving. So it's like an entirely no-touch experience. And while that existed before, people are still, I think, they're kind of anxious about that process. I know I never partook in that process because I want to talk to somebody, ask questions, negotiate a little bit if I can. And so talk to me a little bit about how your folks have begun to transition from what has been for, I don't know, as long as cars have been around, since Ford rolled the first Model T off the factory line, it's been a person-to-person experience. And now you're moving digital. Talk to us about how you're making that happen.
Well, it is still a person-to-person experience, and there are pieces. I think one of the illusions that we have for anybody in sales is we live in an Amazon-based society. Well, I can point, click, and buy. And so consumers have the vision that, well, we should be able to do that anywhere. And not saying that they will. I think it's some, I don't know the specific statistics, some 8 to 10% of car buyers will purchase entirely digitally.
Gotcha.
The point is you have to have the opportunity for them to, or at least start the process. And I think it's important, just like I was saying, to communicate in a format that the customer's comfortable with. You have to have the opportunity to allow the customer to take it as far as they want. Someone may start it digitally. Like for you, if I said, Sean, hey, let's get together. I want to sell you this used, Lexus. And you'd say, okay, hey, cool. I've talked to Mike. I have an idea of who he is. I might start this deal online. But when it comes down to it, because it is a used or pre-owned car, right? You would probably, prior to putting your final signature on everything, say, I'd really like to drive it first. I want to at least touch the wheel. So you have to be able to have an opportunity for people to pick up. And the term digital retailing became really big, probably long about into 2018, 2019, into the car industry, the auto industry. And what happened was you had companies that are saying, oh, well, we're going to create this problem for you because you don't have a digital process. And we're going to sell that problem to the general public. So then the public's like, well, you should have a digital process. But speaking very frankly, through 2019, that was a startup vision. There weren't a lot of good tools. And so I think that is something both from a vendor side and from a retail side in 2020, we were all thrust into a position that it was like, hey, you have to have this process because like you said, they're going to, the pandemic, a lot of government agencies eliminated the opportunity to do that. It did in our state. And one of the things that we went to was, okay, well, how are customers shopping? First, they're going to shop and look at inventory. We have to have a pretty seamless and comfortable process to be able to go through like the financing and credit application process. We incorporated a digital signing product. I won't mention the product unless you want me to, but there's multiple ones out there. Some of them are good, and quite frankly, some of them are not so good. So if you're looking into that process to plug into your website, check them out. The one, I'll just say it, the one that we landed on and are using is DocuSign.
Very popular.
Yeah, Adobe Sign is another very good one that we researched. But then it created a plug-in process because you've got, salesperson paperwork that's 10, 15 pages in our state. Then you have financial paperwork to finalize a loan that's another 10, 15 pages plus optional products and so forth. So you kind of have to have this menu-driven, where is the person at? Where's the consumer at? And how can I meet them there to best serve them? And I think one of the keys is when consumers really believe that about you, they can see that about you or your company, that removes a lot of apprehension. The other, the kind of the last piece on this with as far as implementing those digital processes. So we had everything implemented by probably end of March last year.
That was really ahead of the ball, wasn't it?
I would like to think so. It depends on who you ask.
That's true. I mean, if you're looking at like 2019, maybe our goal was to get it done November of 2019, but then the pandemic happened. And I know a lot of people in the auto industry wish they would have had an entirely digital process in place March of 2020, for sure. And maybe they still might not have caught up to that.
Well, and in fairness, when I say we had it implemented, it was by the end of March, because I think pandemic kind of hit middle of March. End of March, we had something there. And even then, it wasn't perfect, but it was at least an opportunity. I think I explained to you on our initial meeting that it was like our state, the government said, okay, you can't have in-person car sales. Wow. And then, so we're like, oh, okay. And then the state realized, well, they had forms that required wet signatures. They weren't completely digital.
Right. And so now you've just shut down my entire industry. Thank you very much. You know?
And then 2 days later, they come back and they're like, oh, just kidding. We didn't mean you couldn't sell cars at all. We meant you could do internet sales. And we're like, still a problem.
Still a problem.
With signatures.
I got to sign it. Yep.
So we literally implemented this 95% digital process to the point where we had the car completely sanitized. We had the remaining 2 documents that needed wet signatures sitting in the driver's seat with a set of keys. So the customer would send us their ID. We'd verify the ID digitally. We'd verify the docs digitally. And we had a pretty touchless process, but it still afforded the customer the opportunity to touch and feel the product and drive and so forth. So by April, we actually really had it fully implemented, and it was pretty good. And we've continued on with that. And as things have returned to normal, right, we have seen, especially now, we'll sell 5% of our cars pretty touchless, out of state and those sorts of things. But the other 95%, there's some sort of interaction at some point. Sure. So you just have to meet the customer where they're at. Where are they at in the process, and be willing to meet them there.
And so we talked a lot about kind of the past of this, pre-owned vehicle industry. We talked about a little bit about the present. Let's move into the future, and it could come from the past or the present. But I'd love to know from you, where do you see people in your industry, salespeople, relying on hope just a little too much? And this is pretty endemic among salespeople in general, because I mean, even I rely on hope probably more than I should, and I'm the guy that invented, all of the bulletproof selling, a repertoire, if you will. So where does it really come in from you? If you look across your industry, all the salespeople that you're currently in contact with, if we could help remove hope a little bit, what area would that need to be in?
That's a really good question. I think I think that's very unique to first the individual. Because I think a lot of people come into sales and they don't know first what to do. And so they're coming in hoping, right?
Right.
And one of the things then, the second piece it's dependent on is the dealer training opportunities, training not just for the salesperson, but training for the management teams. Yeah. And the reason is because if that is what is involved in the salesperson's life, or their sales life from the beginning, I'm going to rely on hope. Gosh, I hope a customer shows up today. Yeah. That is what is going to end up being ingrained in their being. That's what they're going to know. Yeah,
so which is why when I walk to a dealership now, sometimes I see like 8 dudes and gals just standing around like sipping coffee, and it's like what are they called? Like a shark gathering. Like just a bunch of people waiting.
The water cooler talk.
Yeah. And it's like they're all just waiting for a customer to walk in. Nobody's prospecting, nobody's manning the phone. So yeah, keep going, sir. I'm right there with you.
So I think I think there's a few things. One, salespeople do need to do what's comfortable to them. If you're comfortable on the phone, then get a phone list and start there. If you're comfortable with social media, start on your social media connections and so forth. So that's the first thing, is to eliminate the hope, is do what you're good at. Secondly, is you to be able to expand. And I think there's a lot of times that our life is about expansion. It's about growth. You have to find somebody that is doing well in the space that you want to do well in, and emulate them. We've heard it, and you're probably a fan of, Tony Robbins says, success leaves clues, right? So if success leaves clues, you have to find other people that are doing it. And I do think it's really valuable, because you're looking from the kind of boots on the ground. I have a skewed perception, because I'm going to see through the lens of what we do at our dealership. Our dealership has, 2-3 days a week of formal training. Well, even that, one of the keys is when you're doing formal sales training. And for anybody who's watching this, if you're a salesperson that doesn't participate in this, I would encourage you having a serious conversation with your management team, and saying, hey, I want to be able to develop. When we do formal sales training, we insist that not just the sales team come. See, that's one of the problems. You have this broken process, because the sales team will come to training, but then management doesn't come to training, because they go, well, I already know what that's about.
Yeah, I'm good there. Yeah.
Well, how do you create any accountability if you don't know what the heck is being taught to your sales staff? How do you?
Which is why so many of these salespeople, and I'm sure you've seen this, they just go through training, and they assume that this is going to go away in about 2 weeks.
Yeah,
that's the life cycle of training. I will not be expected to implement this past 2 weeks, so I'm just going to sit here in the training, think about the great weekend I'm going to have, and tune out.
Well, and often that happens. It's the flavor of the day. And so one of the keys is, when you work for an organization, when you work for a dealership, when you work for a manager that has that flavor of the day training, and you miss out on the accountability, then if you have a salesperson that is highly self-accountable and highly motivated by whatever they're motivated by, because not everybody is motivated by money, right? I know it's always a motivator, but there's other factors that come into that. I think, to me, that's a really missing piece.
Let's absolutely dive in here then, because we get to build a system, and this is one that I know is needed across the sales industry. So you and I get to build it. We're going to copyright it. And if anybody wants to cut us a check later from that fat commission that they're going to earn, they can send it right to both of us. Split it down the middle. Okay. So we talk about building training. So what I'd like to do is build this from the perspective of the salesperson that might not have a manager that's holding them accountable. Okay. And so what that means is, if you're a salesperson watching this, if you're learning something from Tony Robbins, or you're learning something from Mike Phillips, or you're doing what you should be doing, reading, studying, watching YouTube videos from great sales trainers, and you learn something, if that's the only way you get training, you can use this system. If your company, like Mike's, does have formal training, well, here's a great way for everybody to hold each other accountable. So that's the system we get to build. But I definitely want to make sure we include those salespeople that don't have the type of top-end support that you do.
Sure.
Because that's obviously needed and necessary for growth. But some salespeople, especially entrepreneurs, we're kind of on our own here, so we just have to do it ourselves. So we talk about building systems and trimming hope away from our sales strategy. We use that acronym TRIM. So the first piece of this is the T, which is trigger. As a salesperson, if I'm learning something new, what is the trigger that I need to build to hold myself accountable, or to ask a peer or even my sales manager to hold me accountable? Is it when I learn something and I want to try it? Is it when I learn something and I want to maybe set a metric around it, like make 10 calls or try this 5 times with people that walk in the door? What is the trigger that I really need to start setting up to try out anything that I learn in training?
So I'm going to go back just a step, if I may.
Yeah.
So if we're building a system, I think the core of training, when we and we take a very fundamental approach. When you're going to train somebody from a management perspective, from a trainer perspective, then there's 3 steps, right? First step is you tell them what you're going to tell them. Second step is you tell them, and then the third step is you tell them what you told them. Right? And you can go, well, gosh, that's really simple and silly. Yes, it is really simple, because if you go through that process in training, understand that 1 hour's worth of training or 2 hours worth of training is never going to be enough. It takes, I think, psychologically 26 spaced repetitions of repeating something.
Nice.
So back before your trigger, if I'm looking at it from an individual point of view, from a salesperson, I would say, 1, what do I want to learn? Like, what do I want or need to learn, right?
Sure.
Then I'm going to go out there and find the tools, or find the information that I want to learn it. and then I'm going to implement it.
Yeah.
So that would be my three. Okay, so find out what I want to learn it, implement. So then what you're saying is, okay, well, what's the trigger?
Yeah.
I think the trigger becomes you taking the initiative as a salesperson to tell somebody that will help create a mutual accountability. So even though if it's a sales peer, oftentimes in sales we run with like battle buddies, right? You've got somebody else that it's like, okay, I'm the same. Even as an entrepreneur, Sean, you have people that will check up on you, that you're kind of connected with, that you guys
I'm meeting
run
with
together.
one of them later today. I have to. Yeah.
So what's important in kind of a peer mentor situation is just tell somebody, hey, Sean, this is what I'm going after this month, dude. Would you do me a favor? Just throw it on your calendar and ask me about it 3 weeks from now, a month from now, 6 weeks from now, whatever the target is. Because definitively, and if you're going after that target, you have to have something that's measurable. So without
we're going to get there. Yeah.
Sure.
So let's walk through the process here, because measurable
Absolutely.
is the last piece. So I don't want to skip ahead.
I imagine.
So we got the trigger in that, asking somebody to hold you accountable, and that might be a peer, or if you have that type of a relationship with your sales manager, to be able to say, hey boss, I know we're doing these 5 things. I'm taking this extra thing on. I'd love it if you could check in with me. And if it works, great, I'll teach it to the team. But I need somebody to check in with me just to make sure I do it. So that's a great trigger. Next thing we need to do is make this thing repeatable. And so if this is something that I'm going to use for any new thing that I learn that I want to try. Now, with campaigns and prospecting, sometimes that'll live as like a campaign or a task list inside of a CRM. This could be placed in a CRM if we set up a series of steps. But how do you recommend that we make this thing repeatable, so that if I learned, or if I come across 12 things in the course of a year that I want to try, I don't just have to try to remember, well, I need to make sure that I tell somebody that I'm going to be doing this, and ask me accountable, and the next piece is this, and the next piece is this. Where do you recommend somebody store this outside of their head so they can focus more on trying and executing than on remembering the process?
So for me, I'm a little bit old school on this one. And it is one that I'm a big fan of. Just write it down. Get a notebook.
Yeah.
And write it down. Now, if you're not a fan of a notebook, use the Notes app in your phone. If you're not a fan of that, I would not, my opinion, Sean, would not be, don't jump right in and, we got to have this CRM process and this lengthy process, because speaking very frankly, what if it doesn't work? What if you do the stuff and you achieve the goal that you wanted, but that outcome is like, oh gosh, that's not where it actually isn't where I wanted to be at. You have to be able to go back and look at your steps. So keeping it really, really simple, pick whatever you can connect with, but just write it down. So if the trigger is keeping someone accountable, the repeatable is start by writing it down so that you can articulate it to somebody else. Hey, here's what I did.
Right, love it. And then you mentioned, not putting it in a CRM, because what if we don't get what we're after? So you're going to love the next piece of this process, which is, how do we actually make this thing improvable? So we've got the trigger, we've got how to repeat it, get it outside your head, Notes app, piece of paper. If it's something that belongs in a CRM, we would be remiss to say don't put it there. So if it belongs there, get it in a CRM, especially if it involves a client contact, so we have that record of contact. Now the next piece is making sure that this thing is actually improvable. And so should we do that because I want to make sure we don't say this to the measuring piece, right? So along the way, we find the very best salespeople in the world will micro adjust and iterate if they know intuitively, I know I thought I was going to be making 5 calls today, but I've got this block of time and I could be really making 10, but the plan says 5, but I have the opportunity to do 10. I better just adjust and make 10 calls. You know what I mean? So to be able to improve along the way as the situation calls for, how do you recommend people do that when they're trying to implement a new idea, new tactic, new piece of training?
Salespeople are emotional. And so one of the keys is you have to non-emotionally look at the data that you're collecting. And I know that there's probably some skip ahead to the measurable piece, but you have to you have to realize, I got to collect some data on this. Salespeople, regardless of industry, are measured by their results, right? No matter what. Like, you can be the nicest person in the world, but if you don't produce, you're not a good salesperson, period.
Right.
Some people may hate that I'm saying that, but that's a fact. If you don't produce results. So like what you're saying, trigger, create accountability. The next step is, just write
Making
the stuff down. How do I make it improvable? I think besides the fact that you have to remove the emotion and look at the data for what it is so that you can make necessary adjustments is one. Second, I think that in that improvable piece, if you had enough confidence in the person at first to ask them to hold you accountable, have them look at the results with you and get a third party perspective. Hey, and don't as salespeople, we all want to sell people on our way of doing things. So we go, hey, Sean, I got this stuff and here's all this and I need you to look at it and just tell me why it doesn't work. Don't do that crap, right? Just look at people and say, hey, listen, I've got all this stuff. I'd love for you to look at it and get your perspective. Just ask that simple question and get that perspective from probably your sales peers. Get that perspective that somebody, like we said, if success leaves clues, get that perspective from somebody who maybe has achieved the results. You're trying to implement a new system.
Yeah.
So I would say if you're willing to ask that person, that I would ask the same person who's going to, the accountability person, ask them for their feedback, because you're going to have your own skewed view of what the information is.
Yeah, absolutely you will. And this is something that we see across a lot of the sales teams that I get to work with, in that they'll try something. Salespeople will do something on their own, never taking the time to even bring it to the team to ask, hey, has this been done before? I've been here 2 years, which is not, like a short amount of time, but Bob over there has been here, or Sally's been over here for like 3 decades. They've probably seen or tried something like this in the past, and it would really behoove us. That's a military term, it would behoove us to take the time to at least bring that to the team to say, this, I read this in a book, or I caught this on a podcast, or this was in the training that we all went through last week. I'm thinking of trying it this way. Have we ever done that before? And, if we did and it worked, great. How do we replicate it even better? If it didn't work, what should we have done differently? And that way I can save myself the 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 4 years, whatever it might take, to have to learn that the hard way. So I love this, man. We've got the trigger. We've got making it repeatable, making it improvable. Now I think we're going to hop into your favorite piece, making it measurable. Yeah. How do I make sure that this stuff actually works and that it's worth repeating in the future?
The biggest key to having something measurable is you need tangible evidence. So in other words, if you're in car sales, for example, and you're saying, hey, I want to learn how to improve on our sales process, at the end of, you can't measure emotion. You can't take emotion out of an ATM, right? It comes down to like, oh, hey, it made me feel really good. Man, I sure helped. I sure made a lot of friends and met a lot of customers today. Yeah. Okay, but did you sell a car?
I can't pay my bills, but I got lots of friends.
Yeah. If that's the result that you're looking for, if the result is I have to sell this product, or the result you're looking for is did I complete my 45 outbound sales calls, or the result is what is the engagement percentage based off of my Facebook social media, I think you need to pick some targets going into it, knowing that those targets may not be the targets that you end with. And so I mean, I can't tell somebody in your audience, Sean, like, oh, well, you need to pick this one item and measure it, because it's all going to be relative to what you're trying to accomplish.
Very relative. And if we don't take the time at the outset to even define what the objective is, then we're kind of just shooting arrows in the dark and hoping something lands. Right. So, to really swing back to the beginning of this whole thing, we have to figure out, what is the end result this thing is supposed to achieve? And we did mention that even before the trigger, because if I don't have that, when I come time to measure, what am I measuring for? What am I measuring against?
Absolutely. And I mean, I think in most cases, maybe not every case, but every case that I can think of in my brain is when I'm looking for measurable results, what are the tangible, what is the numerical piece that I'm measuring? Because when we're looking at analytics and data, almost always there's some sort of associated numerical data that I can say, hey, this went up or this went down. And again, one of the things I think salespeople should understand, or I would hope, one nugget of information I would want to share is it's like, we all look at it so heavily in black and white, like I succeeded or I failed. I succeeded in doing this thing or I failed in doing this thing.
I made the sale or I didn't. That's it.
Yeah, well, but there's a lot of gray area in between. You got a result. You got a measurable result. How did you get that measurable result? If I wanted to sell 20 cars and I sold 15, what happens is we always focus on the lack of those 5 car sales. Instead, focus on what were you successful at in doing the 15, because if you can repeat that,
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
then next month, in theory, could you sell 30, right? Maybe
Right,
not,
right.
but you could probably get to the 20 that you wanted to.
And then of course there's always the where the 15 cars that I sold, all like upper end Lexus, Rolls Royce type cars, instead
Sure.
of moving 20 Honda Accords that are all 20 years old. You know what I mean? Like there's a
Absolutely.
vast difference in the margin and the commission. So
Sure. And
absolutely,
go back
no, I
and look
love
at
it.
that data.
Yeah,
Go back and
exactly.
look at,
Yeah.
I mean, because that's not, how many commuter cars did I sell? How many luxury cars did I sell? How many trucks did I sell? That's a whole different way to slice the pie.
Oh
And then
yeah.
if you said, well, gosh, I'm not very good at selling luxury cars, what should you do? That's the thing I want to learn. I want to go learn product knowledge on luxury cars. There's a wealth of information on the internet,
Oh yeah.
so
Yeah, and of course, you got your peers, you got your leadership, and if you go to your leaders and say, "Hey, I'd like to make you all more money, but I need to learn X, Y, and Z," and they shunt you or turn you away, go work for Mike, because I know he's looking for people with that type of attitude.
always.
Always, always. Well, Mike, it's been a pleasure, sir. We could talk for another 5 hours. I'm sure I'll have you back on the show. But for the folks that are interested in learning more about you, your mindset, you got a lot of stuff out there in social media. So you don't just have to try to get to Mike's lot and visit him to learn from him. So how do we get more into your world and about all the cool things you got going on?
Sure. No, thank you. Thank you for having me on, Sean. It's been a really great conversation. It's good to chat with you. Best way to contact me, probably my personal email address is mike@leadtheteam.net, leadtheteam.net. I do a lot of I share a lot of information, mostly leadership based, on YouTube, and that's just my name, youtube.com/Mike Phillips. And so, I like you said, I'm on just about every social media platform. I'm the most active on YouTube, and then on my personal Facebook. If anyone wanted to connect with me there, I'd love to, man. Love to start a conversation on any facet of this. And then certainly, yeah, if you want to buy a car, or you're looking for a transition in your sales career, you can email me or message me there about that too. I'd love to talk.
Love it, man. Well, please make sure that you are hooking up with Mike. Great guy, very knowledgeable, and of course, he's got probably more videos and podcasts out there than I have built. So if you like learning from me, go learn from Mike. He's somebody I definitely recommend sending you over to. And as far as us here at Bulletproof Selling, of course, make sure you're following us on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and on YouTube for these live streams. If you can't catch them live, you can definitely catch the recordings. And of course, the podcast we make out of this on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, anywhere that podcasts can be found. And of course, for more sales systems to help you actually get your pipeline to perform better, to help you replace hope with more certainty, check out all the free resources that are popping up every single day of the week over at www.bulletproof-selling.com. Well, Sean Rhodes here. It's been a pleasure serving all of you in the sales community with Mr. Mike Phillips. Mike, let's go out there, make selling bulletproof.
Absolutely.